Today and tomorrow we will dive deeper into hopefully, we will dive in the ultimate nature of the mind, its emptiness. And that's a topic that's very dear to me, and I can say that got my curiosity even long before I was Buddhist. I was probably in my mid-20s, very much into poetry, and I remember I would spend hours in my family home in Burgundy. We had a pond next to our place, and I would just sit on the bank of the pond and trying to capture with words as much as possible the truth about nature, not to mix it with my own story, but to really transcribe the external world into words. And I failed. I couldn't make it. Because the more I tried and the more I understood, and that's maybe something that by meditating on the first phase of these teaching on the conventional nature of the mind, that you touched a bit experientially, that everything that we are knowing from the external world, we know it through it appearing to our awareness. So it's always going through an appearance. It's never exactly direct in the sense of bypassing an appearance. It's always through something that is reflected at the surface of my consciousness, so to say. And I felt that I couldn't capture the essence of the external world in words, because I could not extract myself from the equation. And then I said, okay, if that is so, then maybe there's a very intimate link between consciousness and the external world. And the topic of the nature of the mind was starting to be a focus of my inner journey, even I think it was 10 years before I was actually Buddhist. And it is also because I was working with a very beautiful poet in France, wonderful poet, who had this philosophy that poetry would be to connect with the presence, with the experience of the external world before the words can actually make a difference between observer and observed. It's a very profound philosophy behind that. Somehow with words we could try to indicate an experience before there's an actual sense of me observing and the world that is observed. It's not even Buddhist. And preparing for these 2 sessions, I understood it was brought back to my attention that in the West we have a lot of philosophy that try to go beyond this duality problem. And that's not a chance if very often while I teach, people speak of unity. We are all one. Everything is one. It's not because we've been all in India. We have also these philosophical tenets in Europe. Some of them are called monism. Monism is a philosophy of mono, for only, for one, for the idea that matter and consciousness are essentially one substance. And this poet was inspired by that. And I was very, very touched, because the more I wanted to capture the essence of the external world, the more I felt lonely. The more I felt that this world that was outside could not be captured. That I was here trying to capture something that was invariably other. The more I was focusing, the less I found myself belonging to this world. So there was a very big sense of duality there. And loneliness also, because I think at the depths of loneliness, there's the idea of a strong me that is totally separate from the outside external world. And that's something that comes often, that can come, when we meditate on the conventional nature of the mind. I told you in the first sessions that before we embarked in understanding the relationship between object and subject, that we go deeper into the inquiry of the ultimate nature of the mind, there is a sense of duality. But it's a healthy duality, because we notice that there is a mind, that there is an external world, and there are these two things, and the two things exist. But before we actually encounter very firmly these two things, it's very hard to understand their relationship, because then it becomes something like a play of words. But if we want to experience, we have to first find the nature of the mind and to know that it is different from matter. It is non-material. It's impossible to get to understand the true nature of the mind if we don't find it. That makes sense, right? So in this journey that took me years to get anywhere, which I was stuck in many wrong views probably, like this idea that we are all one. What does it mean? You would ask a Buddhist teacher, we are all one. And that's probably what I do also. I would say, but no, we're not one, because if we are one, if I lift my arm, you lift your arm, because we are one. One would be just to be identical. But does it mean that there are no relationship between my consciousness and the external world? We're going to see in these sessions, we're going to touch it a little bit. That is more complicated than that. What is the relationship between mind and matter? What is the relationship between me, observer of the world, and the world outside? And there are many presentations, and there are many different schools in Indo-Tibetan Buddhism. Some which would take a radical standpoint in saying, well, everything is in the nature of the mind. There is no external phenomena. Everything is in the nature of the mind. That's the Chittamatra. And some say, well, no, there are external world, but everything exists subjectively, as opposed to objectively. And there are numerous standpoints on this question of relationship between me observing, or the consciousness that is observing, and the external physical world. And in the deepest system of practice, which belongs to the Vajrayana, the deepest level of mind and the deepest level of matter, which we call energy wind, are one entity. It's very interesting, Because when we hear, oh no, not everything is one, yet at the deepest sense, the subtlest nature of the mind and the subtlest wind energy are one nature. That's not something we hear often in the sutric path. It's mostly in the esoterical teachings. And what I'm trying to suggest by this opening is that not only are we going to explore the deepest nature of the mind, but also the relationship we have with the world outside. And that's a beautiful thing that when we dive into understanding the mind's essential, deepest nature, which is a movement that goes to the inside. So you could say it's a bit self-oriented. It's going to the little, it's going to the narrow, but not in that sense. The deeper we go in the nature of the mind, the more we open to a reality that goes beyond me, that goes beyond everything, and that is shared by absolutely everything that exists. Everything has this deeper nature. So going into the nature of the mind, as we're going to do, is not something limiting. It's something that opens to something that, and I quote His Holiness Dalai Lama, that goes beyond the three time, that has been primordially pure since the beginning. That's the wording that we use often for the emptiness nature of the mind. So it's something that I carry for a long time. I really enjoy this topic. So we're going to explore the nature of the mind in this deepest sense. How practically can we move from understanding its conventional nature, for just finding the nature of the mind, to understanding its deepest nature? Practically, how are we going to do that? And also we're going to touch these issues on relationship between mind and the external world, between object and subject, and slightly also on non-duality, I hope. And to conduct our research, it would be nice that the mind calms down a bit, because we're going to need a sharp and stable mind also. So what is the best way to activate these two factors in the mind? Well, this is the practice of shamatha. So let's find a nice comfortable position. And you're very welcome to take your hand and to put it on your navel. Especially if you're a bit tired today, that makes it easier to follow the breath. And you're probably accustomed to the various steps. The one to start with is to work on the clarity aspect of the mind by exploring the breath. So we can check our posture and check that there's no remaining tensions in the shoulders, on the face. That we enjoy our posture. That we allow ourselves to find it comfortable to just be still, not moving. To see the value of being still. It's not an absence of action. It's by stillness that we dive into something very small in appearance, but that opens to something immense. Breathing in, I know that I'm breathing in. Breathing out, I know that I'm breathing out. And we can use these mental labels, mental words, sometimes maybe not all the time as we find comfortable, in, out. And from time to time also we check that the breath is taking the direction of becoming more silent, more subtle, regular, comfortable, effortless. So primarily we are trying to follow the breath in and out, and sometimes you check the state of your body. How does it feel to be just sitting? And check how is your breath. Is it noisy? Is it irregular, and this questioning of diagnosing our breath helps us exploring it, helps us activating the mental clarity to dive deeper into following the subtle variation of the breath. Is it long? Is it short? You can use the new mental notes. Is it long or short? Or just average? And now we are going to disengage gently from this exploration, to have a sense of contentment, that we're going to express this contentment by just, okay, I don't have to check all the time on my breath. I'm breathing. I'm breathing. The breath is here. Gently focusing on the breath, as if taking a bit of distance. And this time we're going to breathe in and out, count 1 and go up to 5. But during this time, try to stick to your breath. It's going to take repetition to be able to do that without being totally distracted. But that's the aim. We start little. So you may have thoughts, ideas, memories, everything coming to mind, but doesn't mean that you're going to be totally distracted. Keep that in mind. But what we try to achieve at first is to stay for short duration content of being with the breath. And even though there are thoughts, it doesn't mean we are totally distracted. There are just thoughts that make a little noise on the side. Sometimes they take a lot of space, but we are not totally distracted. We don't forget totally what we are supposed to do. Okay? So no exploration of the breath anymore. And we do that for little sessions. Let's try. And then we stop, we relax, enjoy the sounds that we hear maybe around, just to be sitting, be content, check our posture, is it pleasant to be sitting? And we go back again. And we stop. And it's by repetition that slowly the mind would focus. I don't know if we will have enough time to do that, but if you try again during the weekend, give yourself half an hour and do these 2 steps of clarity, stability, and see if at one point the mind doesn't start to land in a more easily sense on the breath. Let's try again. And we may redo 1 session of 5. And another one. And we stop. very important to learn to stop meditation, to really have a clear sense of when I'm meditating and when I'm not meditating. Because otherwise the lines are getting blurred and we do too long and the quality of the mind is diluted and it doesn't achieve much. So we stop and then we go back there again. Let's try to do like 4 cycles of 5. And a corner of your mind can check if you're distracted. Sometime, not all the time. What was my thoughts? Okay, I'll go back to the breath. Okay. And for the meditation of emptiness that we're going to start doing in the second part today, you may start by doing this. We will see that concentration is very important in the first step of the meditation of emptiness. So I'll give you a file to follow the guidelines to meditate on the empty nature of the mind. And one step will be to sharpen the stability and clarity aspect of the mind by doing shamatha practice. Okay, so let's just establish our intention for this session now. That despite this very troubled time, where I think the sense of refuge makes a lot of sense when we see the dangers that we are surrounded by around. It makes really sense to seek a refuge, a place and a shelter where we will find protection. And there are many, many different types of shelters. But there's a very, very strong one, presented as even thicker than the thickest of the concrete or steel shelter that we may find. And it's very closely connected to the topic of the day. By realizing the ultimate nature of the mind, this is a shelter. Because by realizing emptiness, we deconstruct the substrate of all our afflictions, which can generate directly, indirectly, all the various problems and sufferings. So this is the source. The source of exiting our samsara is realizing emptiness. And we do that certainly for our own sake, but also for the sake of others. So let's conjoin this intention to go toward wisdom and refuge with the sense of altruism. Okay. So why is the mind so important? If everything is empty, why meditating on the emptiness of the mind is considered so primary? And there's a quote from His Holiness stating, statements found in Mahamudra and Dzogchen agree that the mind is the creator of the world in this causal sense. And Madhyamika Prasangika, which is considered the highest philosophical school in Indo-Tibetan Buddhism, also see the mind as the primary basis for the arising of phenomena, because all phenomena are mere designation and constructs of the mind. You may have noticed that all tantric tradition emphasize the emptiness of the mind, not the emptiness of external object or even of the person. This is because our mind is the creator and the basis of both samsara and nirvana. So that's just part of the answer. There are much more why the mind is so important in being the object of our wisdom and understanding its deepest nature. And we saw some of those in the first sessions. That it touches pretty much our self-identification. We are identifying ourselves really a lot on the basis of our mind, on the basis of our experience. Oh, today I feel bad, I feel good. This is a shitty day. This is an awesome experience. All these are various ways of knowing. It's all in the mind. These are all ways of knowing the external world, what we call the aggregate of feeling. This is in the mind. If we are suffering or having good experience, there is something outside that can be a cause for our experience. It doesn't negate that, of course. It would be going too far. But these are all experience. These are all ways of knowing. I'm knowing this landscape in a nice, comfortable way. Or the second after, I know this place in a very disturbed, stressed way. These are ways of knowing. These are features that the mind is taking that experience the external world in a certain manner. These are minds. These are in the mind. I identify myself with habits, with patterns, with anger, with... These are all features of the mind. So in our quest to understand the deepest nature of the mind is also to ask the question, who am I? And we saw also that there are some schools that say when you are looking for finding the substance of a person, what do you find? You find this mental consciousness. This is the deepest sense of a self. And the higher school would disagree with that, would say this is not even a person. It goes together with the person, but they are traveling together, but they are not the same. So understanding the emptiness of the mind can decrease very strongly, even at a conceptual level, decrease strongly what is needed for the afflictions and the various mental trouble to arise. Because they all need these afflictions, anger, jealousy, miserliness, distraction, they all need this superimposition of an inherent existence. We're going to touch that. Okay, so why is it also beneficial to meditate on the emptiness of the mind? Well, we saw because this is a way out of samsara, basically. But it's also that it changes a bit. Rather than, who is meditating now? It's the François that feels a bit tired, that would like a second coffee. And when I look at my mind, I see all the distraction. And we saw how much we can be ordinary in our self-perception. But when we understand the deepest nature of the mind, we are going inside to see something extremely pacifying and liberating. So it changes the perspective also. That we don't always go inside to find, oh, I'm again doing the same things, I'm mad, I always have these things. No, we look at something inside that is, yeah, I can say extraordinary. Because we're not accustomed to that. And because the emptiness of the mind is our Buddha nature. When the Buddha was saying, well, you all have a certain Buddha figure with the major and minor marks inside, you all have, every being have these Buddha within. What they meant was the emptiness of the mind. Why we call the emptiness of the mind Buddha nature? In a loose sense, because it's a cause of Buddhahood. And His Holiness said, we say it's loosely because it's not an actual cause, because it's just an empty, it's just permanent. It's permanent are not cause. But in a poetical sense, you would say, yes, this is a cause of Buddhahood, because when you realize the nature of the mind, you gain freedom from samsara. And you go toward Buddhahood. That's what His Holiness said. So Buddha nature is something that can transform into the bodies of the Buddha. And our Buddha nature, the emptiness of our mind, can transform into the emptiness of the nature of a Buddha, of the mind of a Buddha. And the good news also is that because our mind is not existing inherently, we can change. Imagine you are going from Jerusalem to Tel Aviv on a on a very little scooter. You know this scooter that you have, like, I don't know how you call them. Trottinette in France, that's how we call them. Trottinette. I don't know if you all see what I mean, but well, this trottinette in Paris, well, they've been removed because they were annoying, but this trottinette, you could not go beyond 20 kilometers an hour. Impossible, because they are physically constrained that you cannot go past beyond that speed. So imagine you go from Jerusalem to Tel Aviv on the motorway with this little trottinette. And there's nothing you can do. It's physical. There's something that hinders that machine to go as fast as a car. And sometimes we could feel like that my mind is so disturbed. There is something deep down inside me that hinders me to make spiritual progress. There is a constraint, there is a limitation, there is a physical or mental barrier that prevents me from developing. Because we identify with the various patterns of our mind. And when we see the conventional nature of the mind, we already touch something very deep, is that we have these mental trouble of the mind, but they're not always there. It's like clouds, and the conventional nature of the mind stays pure. In a sense, clear can be pure. But when we realize the deepest nature of the mind, we see that all these mental trouble, some of the habits, nervousness, anxiety, distraction, they don't touch at all the nature of the mind. They are totally not within the nature of the mind. And because of that, we understand deeply that we can change, and that allow someone to start to be open to the idea that an ultimate transformation and becoming a Buddha is possible. We understand that there's not a micro chipset in the mind that no matter what we try prevents us from going toward Buddhahood. We understand it's not there. It's not there. It's not limiting. I'm not limited. And for as long as we grasp at this intrinsic sense of I, mine, my mind, my emotions, and etc., we are exactly doing the same as having a little chipset that prevents us from going full speed on the motorway. It's not there. The mind is not limited in the same sense as the scooter. But that's just an article of faith until we touch it experientially. And we say, wow, it is not there. So that's a huge benefit of meditating on the nature of the mind. And what we're going to try to do also is not to fall in the extremes. oh, but the mind is empty, it means nothing can hold onto it because it's empty. If I do this or that, it doesn't matter because everything is just empty. We're going to try also to secure our reflection on emptiness to be sure that we don't fall in some extreme, because it's quite easy to do that. And hopefully Lama Tsongkhapa, which serve as a referent for these 2 days, will help us not to fall into these extremes. What are the other benefits? And I will stop with this. It's understand fearlessness. By understanding that we saw that consciousness is conventionally the deepest sense of agency. Agency is the one doing the action. And we say, oh, François is doing the action, the body is doing the action. But when we look deep down, we see that it's an immaterial thing. Consciousness is that immaterial thing that is at the source of all my actions. And by understanding this emptiness of that consciousness, we touch a bit what Buddha mentioned when he said fearlessness, without fear. And obviously without solitude and loneliness. By understanding emptiness, we get one step toward the direction of fearlessness, immense fearlessness. We say that the Buddha, one of their features is total fearlessness. That's one of their attributes. And fear, which could be inside many of our afflictions, takes also the substance of this grasping at inherent existence. And one of the last one, benefit for our discussion is to also, it really shakes our innate apprehension of me stepping outside the world and just I pick the world. I'm just the observer. I'm just totally outside the phenomenological world. I'm totally separate. We're not going to end up saying I'm one with the world. But it really shakes the superimposition of me being an agent that is inherently separate from what I observe. Okay, so we're going to do a break of 5 minutes before we follow on the beginning of the meditation emptiness. If I can stay here, if anyone has question, we can also start the questions. Otherwise, you can go for small stop. Grab yourself a tea or coffee.
Can I ask a question, François, please?
Yes?
Thank you. Maybe a little bit provocative, so sorry.
Please.
We've been studying with Yael for hours, days, months, the notion of dependent horizon. Emptiness and dependent horizon. And I think I understand a little bit already. And you opened the session today by speaking about us and external worlds. So for me it's confusing because it's not going together. If there is dependent horizon, rather it's external world. Can we not see everything like you and me and the house and the pond that you mentioned as a big dinosaur or a big spaceship, that everything is in
So first of all, the understanding of dependent arising doesn't contradict the common sense. It goes along with the common sense. And the common sense urges us to think, well, yeah, there's an external world. Is it inherently external? Well, it's just external. It's nominally, conventionally external in that sense. The Buddha was quite clear in saying, I don't dispute the views of the world. When it touches about the words and the convention, Buddha was getting along the convention. But in the deepest meditation of emptiness, it is beyond words anyway. And that was Buddha's insight. But when it comes that we are using words and relating with the daily basis activities, we can still say, well, yes, there's an external world. The external world doesn't contradict dependent arising. The fact that there's an external world doesn't contradict dependent arising. I think when we understand dependent arising, we understand there is the in and out, there's me and you. But it doesn't mean that because we say external world, that we mean that this external world is existing on its own. There's an external world that exists in a dependent sense also. So external world doesn't exclude, dependent arising. And we can say also, yes, we have a sense of oneness because we are one humanity. Maybe that's the ship you're talking about. We are the single, we belong to the same human species, or the living organism, or I don't know if that's answering your question. But that's part of the tricky, really tricky thing, you know, is that meditation of emptiness, while meditating on emptiness, it is shaking our worldview. But it doesn't shake the existence of the world, because if that does shake the existence of the world, it means you go too far. Because if it exists, it cannot be refuted. So in our meditation of emptiness, we are not refuting what exists. We refute something that doesn't exist and that is tainting our experience almost all the time. This is what we refute. We don't refute the world. Because otherwise you are left with what? You are left with, oh, nothing exists intrinsically, therefore it doesn't make a difference if I'm running over the rabbit or I avoid the rabbit on the road. Because it's all basically totally devoid of the way it appears to me. And that is a wrong view. Buddha was, for a reason, not teaching emptiness to everyone, is because if your understanding of emptiness prevents you to understand the laws of karma, the law of one action gives rise to a result, and that is incontrovertible, this is absolutely certain. The basis of moral value holds on to the fact that my action has a consequence. And if your view of emptiness is touching that negatively, this is a sign that you go to an extreme. And the very, very, very tricky thing in meditation of emptiness is to see dependent arising and emptiness as the two sides of the same coin. One the stronger you will understand emptiness, the stronger the external world will make sense. And that's really, really, I'm not exaggerating. The more you will understand emptiness, the more you will understand the law of causality. This is when, and that's Tsongkhapa saying, you have really accorded in your experience the view of emptiness with dependent arising. Okay, so the first step in the meditation of emptiness, whatever meditation of emptiness is first that we have to be clear to what we want to understand. And that's tracing back to your question, what we want to refute, well, what we want to achieve. The first step is to find the mind. Okay. The mind, it exists. It's not something we can refute. It's not something we can negate. If it exists, well, it exists. If we start to say we want to negate consciousness or we want to negate the world, this is not meditation of emptiness. Imagine I have some blue glass, tainted glass, and I've held them for so long that I forgot about them. Everything in my external environment looked totally blue. And what appears to my mind is the blue world. Everything blue, 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 blue. If someone wants to say to me, oh, François, no, you're deluded, it's not blue. The sand in the beach is not blue. The first thing he would have to say is he would have to touch my glass and remove them. But the touching of my glass is the first step. You have to find the thing that you want to remove. This is the best way to secure a meditation. You want to remove that thing that is responsible for tainting the way I perceive the world. That's the first step in the meditation of emptiness, to find that thing that we want to refute. Refute or negate. We don't want to negate something that exists. We want to remove the thing that makes us exaggerate the world. And in the practice, this is a tricky part. We want to observe the extent to which we are exaggerating reality in a sense of projecting a sense of inner existence, existence on its own, intrinsic existence. We want to capture the times during which we are actually believing that either the external world or our mind are existing by themselves, in and by themselves, intrinsically, as opposed to in a dependent sense. And that's something tricky because it's there very often. And at first, when we lack the standpoint of knowing how do we exist really, it's even hard to capture something that we've been so ingrained into believing that it's hard to find it. So we want to touch that. Imagine I see the blue mountain. You're not going to say to someone, oh, I cut your eyes. No, you just want to remove what makes someone perceiving the external world in a way that is not as it is. So the complicated technical world in this first phase of meditation on emptiness is identifying the object of negation, identifying the thing that we want to know it's not existing in the way it appears. Imagine you're mad at someone. At that time, it's not obvious that we exaggerate the problem of that person. It seems so real that this person is just annoying. Just annoying. That's his nature. I'm so certain of it. At this time, we have the red glass. We don't pay attention to that. So it works the same for emptiness that it works for anger. We have to first, how do I perceive that person? Well, he's just purely annoying. From birth, he was annoying. I think he was a toddler or he was 6 months old, probably he was annoying his mom. Cruelly annoying his mom. It's just like that. That's his nature. We see that person as totally fused with this annoyance. And that's our object of negation. No, maybe he was a nice person. He's just probably was kind also. Just some time with me. Was he, or maybe sometime he was even kind with me. He did something good. We restore the true picture of what is this person. We encounter the person's nature beyond our exaggeration. And in the meditation of emptiness, we are superimposing a sense of self-existence, existing on its own. Something exists on its own. So how do we do that? Because if we don't do that, we cannot prove it is not existing the way it appears. Shantideva says, without finding the superimposed existence, one cannot apprehend its non-existence. We cannot miss that step, because otherwise we are doing a meditation or something we don't even think we have this exaggeration. Or in the same way, oh, I'm not meditating on removing or finding antidotes to anger because I'm not pissed. I'm not pissed. I'm not mad. Stop saying that. If we don't find that we have a mental affliction, it's going to be very hard to apply an antidote to it. Imagine you apply an antidote to something you think you don't have. What's the strength of that? Yeah, maybe happy, yes, I'm not mad anyway. So we have to encounter our basic ignorance. We have to encounter our ignorance that very often we are projecting a sense of inner self, inner existence, self-existence, existing objectively. These are all synonymous. Intrinsically, truly, as opposed to in a dependent arising manner. That's tricky, huh? Wow. That's a tricky thing. Because imagine someone has very, very much trouble identifying anger. How can that person identify ignorance? It's much deeper, it's much more subtle. So I would say, to meditate on emptiness, we have to be more sensitive to our inner states. And the more we will develop this emotional intelligence that we're paying attention to our afflictions or even positive states of mind, the easier it's going to be to recognize that projection of intrinsic existence. Because if we miss all this and we immediately start to pay attention, we will not find it. For me, it's very hard to think that we can posit it if we don't train our mind to be observing itself, observing what happens. We have to be focused for that also. Pabankar Rinpoche is saying that actually this first step of identifying the object of negation, that's the longest, that's the most complicated. Because you want to observe something that while you have that, you are distracted, because it very often comes when you have a burst of anger. At this time you project the intrinsic existence of the other. But at the time we're angry, we cannot observe at the same time because we are distracted. So you see why it's tricky. We want to observe something which happens very often when we are distracted. That's the way to put it. That's why it's also hard to posit and to find anger when we are angry, because at this time we are distracted. So we want to observe, how do I perceive that person when I'm angry? And at the same time we capture that experience and we see that at this time we project a sense of inherent existence. So the way to do this first step is to witness our mind, and this projection of intrinsic existence comes very often with our affliction. It goes together. Oh, I want this delicious coffee. Oh my goodness, this coffee from Rwanda was gorgeous. And we have an image that lasts maybe a quarter of a second of being very strongly drawn to that coffee, that's attachment, but another part of the mind is projecting, believing the coffee to be inherently satisfying. And this is the thing that we want to capture. And not only once, but at multiple occasions. So at one point we say, wow, but that's here all the time. I'm always projecting. Not always, we have to be cautious. It's not there all the time. This ignorance projecting intrinsic existence, it's not there all the time. There are lots of time when you see a tree, well, it's a tree. You don't believe the tree to be intrinsically existing. So in our effort to find the object of negation, we have to train in being observant of our emotions, our mental factors. And I would say we don't jump straight into observing how much we grasp our mind to be intrinsically existent, because the mind, we've seen it's tricky to find the nature of the mind. So I would say first step, you sit by I don't know, in your room, and you pay attention to the times where you engage with your environment without specifically believing it exists inherently, and to notice the movement of the mind. Often when there's Yeah, you could say an affliction. And slowly, slowly, to see that at this time you are projecting a sense of intrinsic existence. You believe it. And that takes a while. That takes a while. I cannot say that you can achieve that easily, but it's really worth the effort. Because at one point we will say, wow, I have it. Not only I have some of the affliction, but I have this superimposition. I have ignorance. So let's just take 5 minutes to digest this. And you may start to search this superimposed object in the external environment, or even if you have a thought, a trigger, something strong coming to your mind, to see that at this moment, maybe the object of your thought is viewed as existing intrinsically. So this first step, and I think I'm quoting right, Pabonkar Rinpoche say that this is the most complicated, but when you've done that, the rest will follow quite easily. We have to find how the world, our consciousness, is believed to exist in an intrinsic manner by our ignorance. We have to experience how we are grasping. How much? And there are many very, very important sutras that I'm thinking about. Even in the Pali tradition, you have the Satipatthana Sutra, and the Satipatthana Sutra is extremely now renowned in the world, in the Vipassana retreats and so forth, because I think one of the reasons is that it helps us trying to posit when we are angry, when we are not, when we have joyous effort, when we have not, when we are joyful, when we are not. And we can follow when we have this projection and belief in intrinsic existence and when we have not. It's not there all the time. And it's a small technical point probably, but we can say that everything appears as intrinsically existing unless you realize emptiness directly. Everything, even when you meditate on emptiness conceptually, everything appears, that's the point, appears as intrinsically existent. But it doesn't mean you believe it. What we are to find here is when we believe it, because it's much more big, it's much bigger, this sense of intrinsic existence when we believe it. But strictly talking, it appears to us all the time. But there's a difference between when it appears and when we grasp, when we believe. We want to capture this intrinsic existence. That's our object of negation when we strongly believe it. Okay, I say that again. We want to capture this intrinsic existence in the same way we would capture this intrinsic annoying person when we are strongly believing it, when we are angry, or when we are ignorant, or when we have attachment. These are the times where this strong belief in an existence that is not dependent arising, we want to capture when it's actually happening at those moments. And when I was long back in time in the shore of this pond, I was becoming more and more nervous because I was grasping very strongly at finding an external world existing by itself that I could capture. And my mind that was left out of it was also believed to be extremely self-sufficient, intrinsically existing. And obviously I could feel only loneliness because I was at this time very ignorant in the search of how I could capture the external world. I felt very strongly pushed aside from the external world. I was left, me, François, totally outside this world made of many people, various appearances and all things, and I was just me, unable to capture, unable to find the truth of the world outside. And this was all possibly wrong, but I think I saw how much I was grasping at something that is totally, purely existing on its own. And that's what we are encouraged to do in this first step, to see how much we are doing that. And once it's easier to find it for the way I'm relating to this French baguette, for example, when it's just nice and crusty out of the bakery, and I want it because my frozen bread is really soft and mushy. I don't like that. I want my French baguette. And at the time I'm believing it exists on its own, this is the time where it's more easy to find it. And then when we get accustomed to that, we are trying to shift the focus to our awareness. I don't know if you've experienced in these first steps of trying to find the nature of your mind, which I repeat, is this factor that makes possible an appearance, and we engage to that. That was the first step. But sometimes we are trying to find a consciousness that knows on its own. A consciousness that is aware without anything. It's just aware, pure awareness, devoid of being aware of anything. And this is when our search for the conventional nature of the mind turns into being ignorant, because we are trying to find something that doesn't exist. We're trying to find an awareness that knows by itself. But it's always an awareness because it knows something. And I'm already giving the second part of our meditation. That consciousness is not existing on its own because it needs an object. Simple. Because the mind needs an object, it cannot exist by itself on its own. And the line of reasoning that we're using in the meditation of emptiness is the mind doesn't exist intrinsically because it is dependent arising. The mind doesn't exist intrinsically because it's a dependent arising. And it's a dependent arising because it needs an object. It needs object. If awareness was knowing on its own, there are many problems. There would be an awareness that doesn't know anything. And what does it mean to be aware when there's no awareness? Because you don't need anything to be aware. We'll see that tomorrow. So the rest, once you find consciousness, see how much we grasp at this consciousness to be inherently existing, the rest unravels softly, gently, nicely, smoothly. But before that, if we skip this first point, we may not meditate on something we have found. We haven't found consciousness. We don't know what it means. It's just words. Hence, the first parts of the teaching that we did 2 months ago. And second, we have to see how much we grasp. And when we have these two first ingredients, and on top of that, a bit of concentration to be able to capture, because when we're distracted, the thing that we've captured will vanish. We will remember that we have had a movement of the mind, but the moment after, it's already gone. It's like a gas that we're trying to capture in a piece of plastic which has many holes. It just vanishes. And Pabonka Rinpoche says it's just as if you were walking on the street. I will find and I will share the source of that. You are walking next to someone, and not only are you paying attention to what your neighbors on which your how to say the person you are walking next to, you are paying attention to what that person says, but you are also paying attention to the footpath. So here we have to pay attention to stay focused and at the same time pay attention to these movements. But very often we pay attention to our thoughts, and the moment after we don't even remember them. We have to keep remembering them so to be able to deconstruct the process. If we cannot hold that, it becomes pure abstraction. So if you have time from now until tomorrow, spend some time. And I would say first maybe connect to your body, then connect to your feelings. Am I doing experiences that are pleasant, unpleasant? And then to the various movements of your minds. And try to capture the times where the mind is grasping at this inner sense of true existence. Connected to an idea, an object that you see in your visual field, etc. Without finding the superimposed existent, one cannot apprehend its non-existence. We have to find the thing that we want to negate. So we have a bit of time. If you have questions or reserves, objections, things yet that was not clear, correct my mistakes, go ahead.
Can I ask something?
Yes, please.
First of all, before, I just want to say thank you very much. It was so moving. I feel this was an incredible gift. You were so honest in sharing your personal research and development, and it was very, very touching. So in another opportunity, sometime in the future, I would like to ask you, aside of all this, what you think of poetry and art making today after all this research. That's really important for me, but that's not what I wanted to ask. I'm just wondering, you described the superimposition and the projection and the belief and the grasping and of intrinsic, supposed intrinsic existence, and I felt all the time that the notion of permanence is very much intertwined with that, so that when we grasp and believe, we simply kind of freeze stuff as eternal. And when, for example, when you talk about anger, the eruption of anger, so the coagulation of this feeling sensation is just permanentizing, making stuff eternal while they're really not. So we forget impermanence when we experience that.
Yeah. So I permanence can help us, because when we have a superimposition of permanence, we may have superimposition of intrinsic existence, but it's a step beyond, because there are many schools that say, yeah, we superimpose permanent existence, but they don't find the superimposition of true existence, because they believe things fundamentally are truly existing. They are intrinsically existing. So it is not it's not the same. It's a stepping stone. But I think that when you superimpose intrinsic existence, you are superimposing permanent existence also. So it can help, but it's not exactly equal. Someone else?
Hello, Francois.
Hello, Nav. Yeah?
It's been a long time, so I would like to say thank you again for the teaching. I don't know whose advice is this, but I've heard it a couple of times that it's good to analyze the intrinsic self when you have, and you said this also, when you have a strong emotion. And I have been trying to do this when I was angry, and I have this feeling that anger is also this analyzing sort of emotion, that he did this to me and I did this to him, and we try to analyze, and then we go astray to wrong places instead of, as you said, it's distracting. So I'm confused if it's better to do it when you're relaxed or when there is a strong emotion.
Oh, that's tricky. That's tricky, because yes, you've pointed out that it's easy to have ignorance when we have strong emotion, but when we have strong emotion, we lack the cognitive technology to capture that what appear, how much we engage. It's hard to find it when we are disturbed so much. So it's good, I would say, to do that when you're sitting in meditation, because I don't think it's very possible to do that in the midst of your daily life if you cannot even do that while sitting on a cushion. Do that with gentle disturbing emotion. We were led, I remember when I was in Nalanda, you imagine yourself sitting on the edge of a cliff, and you imagine there's a strong gust of wind behind and you fall. Imagine the sense of I'm falling, I am falling. So you repeat that experience mentally, but just to apprehend how much you are projecting yourself to be inherently existing at that moment, and you capture that. So for anger, it's the same. It's not. There's a time where we use the antidote for anger, and we deconstruct and things like that, but this is a particular process that we are doing, which we just want to capture how things appear when we are afflicted. So better to do that on the cushion to start with. And after that, you will start to notice it more and more outside session. Okay.
Yes, but also when you're meditating and you remember anger, then anger arises again, and then I meant not actually in the moment when you're angry, but thinking on the cushion about an angry situation, or just analyzing without.
Yes, definitely. It's actually, you cannot be angry and wise at the same time, so it's sequential. You have a moment of anger, you remember the taste, and you analyze. It's sequential. But yes, I understand what you wanted to say now.
Okay, thank you.
Last question? or question or anything. Huh? Does it make sense a bit, the identification of that object of negation? Because the words are a bit complicated, so I don't want that it becomes too hard to get. You see the point, right? Ah, there's a finger raised.
If there is because I already asked, so if somebody else wants to, then I give you priority.
Yeah, go for it.
You mentioned the word to see things the way they are.
Yeah.
But things are not constant. You mentioned that the subject is not constant, it's changing, it's not permanent. The subject, the mind. Also the object, which you say to see things the way they are, you refer to the object. It's also not constant. It's also changing. I mean, if I see a ball, you just change the barometric pressure and the ball will be smaller or bigger. It's changing, it's influenced by the environment. Also, they are not the way they are, they're also changing their field.
I understand. So I'm moving. Okay? So how can you say, I know the true nature of François because he's moving, it's unstable. But is it still François, one person doing silly things on the screen? Yes, it is. So François, to know the nature of François, you don't have to negate that the thing is actually changing. To know its nature is to know that despite all the changes, the nature of that thing is to be not existing intrinsically. And no matter how much the thing changes, this will remain invariable. That for something to exist, it must not exist intrinsically. That's what I meant by its nature. Okay, last one we have Valdaras de Miranda.
Yeah, you don't have to spell my whole name. But that's enough. What I want to say, not only thank you, but I know that it will be difficult for me now to find all the things I want to buy in the market, because whatever you said is now so strong in my mind that I'll be going with this the whole day.
But please keep it.
Thank you very much.
But yeah, let's make sure that our meditation emptiness doesn't prevent us from functioning. No, but that's the, and I'm emphasized that because that's really the legacy of Lama Tsongkhapa, to say again that the stronger you understand emptiness, the stronger it affirms the view of dependent origination and the law of causality. Yeah. If one affects the other negatively, it means you haven't found the middle way. Very strongly, I'm supporting Lama Tsongkhapa in that. The view of the middle way is to view dependent arising as the meaning of emptiness and emptiness as the meaning of dependent arising. Very, very strongly.